Most animals do not fall apart the way humans do. They slow down, they thin out. Humans decay while still alive. Our bodies begin breaking decades before death, not all at once, piece by piece. Cartilage wears down, skin loses memory of itself, hormones drift, cells forget their instructions. We call it normal, but no other animal seems to pay this price for living longer. And that raises a disturbing question. If aging is natural, why does it feel so violently dysfunctional in humans? Why does a species capable of medicine, technology, and long planning age like a machine running past its intended limits, as if our bodies were built for a shorter story, and every extra year is borrowed time that the system was never meant to support? Because to understand why humans age so badly compared to other animals, we have to look back to a decision evolution made long before aging ever began. Back when survival mattered more than durability, and when no one was thinking about what would happen to the body after it had already done its job. And that is where the problem quietly starts to unfold. Most animals are built to survive just long enough to finish their task. Eat, grow, reproduce, protect offspring, then fade. That is not a flaw. That is efficiency. In nature, durability is expensive. Every extra year of maintenance costs energy. Every repair mechanism costs resources. Evolution does not invest in what it does not need. Once reproduction is complete, the body is no longer the priority. Survival of genes matters. Survival of the individual does not. This is where humans quietly diverge. Humans evolved intelligence, cooperation, memory, and long dependency. Children required care for years. Knowledge mattered. Experience mattered. Older individuals still had value to the group, but the body itself did not receive a full redesign to match that new role. The hardware stayed old. The software expanded, and this mismatch is the first crack. Our bodies were shaped for a world where few lived past 40. Bones did not need to last 70 years. Joints were never meant to carry decades of repetitive strain. Skin was not designed to resist ultraviolet damage for a lifetime. Cells were optimized for speed and reproduction, not endless repair. Other animals age too, but they age cleanly. A wolf slows down, a bird flies less, a deer weakens, then stops. The decline is narrow, focused. Knees give out while the heart still works. Memory slips while muscles remain strong. Hormones change long before organs collapse. Aging in humans is not a single process. It is dozens of small failures unfolding out of sync. This is why it feels so cruel. If the body shut down all at once, it would feel natural. But instead, it leaks, it frays. It reminds you every day that something is going wrong, but never all the way wrong, pain without resolution. And this brings us back to the question that matters, the one we will keep returning to. Why does the human body fail in pieces instead of as a whole? The answer begins with trade-offs. Human biology prioritized early life performance. Rapid brain growth, strong immune reactions, fast wound healing, high fertility. These traits helped young humans survive in hostile environments, but they came with hidden costs. Inflammation that helps you heal at 20 slowly destroys tissue at 60. Cell division that protects you in youth increases cancer risk later. Hormones that fuel growth accelerate breakdown once balance shifts. Evolution accepted these costs because they appear after reproduction. No animal is designed to care about what happens after its genes have moved on. Humans feel the consequences because we kept living anyway. There is another layer that makes it worse. Humans live in bodies built for scarcity, but now exist in abundance. Constant food, artificial light, minimal physical necessity. The systems that once adapted to stress now drown in it. Metabolism, once flexible, becomes rigid. Repair mechanisms slow. Waste accumulates. Aging accelerates not because we live unnaturally, but because our bodies cannot recalibrate fast enough. This is why two humans of the same age can look decades apart. Other animals do not carry this ledger for as long. And then there is the brain. The human brain remains plastic far longer than the body remains resilient. It keeps learning while joints calcify. It remembers while cells misfire. Consciousness outlives structural integrity. This is perhaps the most painful aspect of human aging. Awareness survives longer than the system that supports it. We do not just age, we witness it. That awareness was never part of the original design. No species evolved to observe its own deterioration in real time. Humans did. And once awareness exists, suffering changes shape. Decline is no longer silent, it becomes narrated. Which raises another uncomfortable question. If humans were never meant to age well, why did we evolve to live long enough to notice how badly we age? The answer does not lie in longevity itself, but in what longevity allowed. Culture, memory, teaching, accumulation of knowledge. Aging bodies carried useful minds. Evolution accepted the broken bodies as collateral, and this decision echoes forward into every ache, every stiffness, every moment when the body refuses to keep up with intention, because the human form was not optimized for comfort, or grace, or dignity in decline, but for something far simpler and far colder, and once that purpose was fulfilled, the system was never fully updated, which is why the breakdown begins so early, so unevenly, and why the first signs of aging appear not at the end of life, but quietly, long before, at the point where the body has already given evolution what it wanted, and everything that comes after exists in a kind of biological afterthought, where maintenance slows, errors accumulate, and the body begins behaving like a structure no longer receiving repairs, because from evolution's perspective, it already served its function. And yet humans keep going, keep living, keep demanding more years from a system that was never meant to sustain them, and this is where the real tension begins. Because once we understand that aging is not a failure, but a design compromise, we are forced to confront a harder realization that the pain of human aging is not accidental, not a disease, but the predictable result of a species that outlived the limits of its original design. And if that is true, then the next question is not why humans age so badly, but why some animals seem to avoid this kind of prolonged collapse altogether, and what exactly they did differently at the level of biology, metabolism, and time. Because the contrast is not subtle, and once you see it clearly, it becomes impossible to ignore that humans did not simply age worse by chance, but because they followed a path that no other species fully committed to, a path that traded durability for complexity, speed for awareness, and short-term survival for a long, uneven decline that continues to unfold quietly, even now, as the body adapts to damage by compensating, shifting the burden from one system to another, delaying failure just enough to keep functioning, but never enough to stop the process entirely. Which leads us directly to the next layer of the problem, where aging stops being just about time and starts being about how the human body handles repair, damage, and priority when resources become limited, because that is where the breakdown truly accelerates. And that is where we need to look next, starting with how human cells decide what is worth fixing and what is quietly left behind when starting with how human cells decide what is worth fixing and what is quietly left behind when resources become limited. Every living body is constantly damaged. Heat, movement, oxygen, even normal metabolism slowly tears tissue apart. Aging does not begin when damage appears. It begins when repair can no longer keep up. In most animals, repair is simple because the system is short-lived. Cells divide, fix what matters, and move on. There is no long-term accounting, no need to preserve the body for decades beyond its reproductive window, but the human body is asked to do something different. It is asked to keep going far past the point where evolution stopped optimizing it. Human cells operate on priorities, not fairness. When energy is limited, they choose survival over perfection. They patch instead of restore. They tolerate small errors if those errors do not immediately threaten function. Over time, these compromises accumulate. DNA repairs become less precise. Proteins fold incorrectly and remain. Mitochondria lose efficiency but continue operating. Nothing breaks completely. Everything degrades slightly. This is why human aging feels uneven. Different systems fail at different rates because they are triaged differently. The immune system is a clear example. Early in life, it is aggressive, overreactive. That protects against infection when exposure is constant, and medicine does not exist, but that same aggression becomes destructive later. Chronic inflammation slowly damages joints, blood vessels, and organs. The immune system never learned when to stop. Evolution did not require it to. Other animals avoid this problem by not keeping inflammatory systems active for so long. Their lives end before long-term collateral damage matters. Humans live long enough for their own defenses to turn inward. This pattern repeats everywhere. Hormones that drive growth and fertility destabilize metabolism later. Rapid cell turnover increases cancer risk with time. The brain remains adaptable, but supporting structures weaken. Each feature that helped young humans survive becomes a liability in prolonged lifespan. This is not random failure. It is delayed cost. And once again, the central question returns. Why does this cost fall so heavily on humans compared to other animals? Because humans extended lifespan without redesigning the body. Other species that live long lives, certain turtles, whales, some birds evolved slow metabolism, stable cell division, and efficient repair from the beginning. Human biology is built for speed. Speed helped us outcompete rivals. Speed helped us adapt quickly. Speed helped us survive chaos. But speed burns through structural margin. This becomes most visible in connective tissue. Human joints degrade faster because they were optimized for flexibility and endurance over short, intense periods. Cartilage does not regenerate well because it never needed to. In an ancestral environment, joint failure often coincided with death. There was no evolutionary pressure to maintain cartilage for 80 years, so the body does not try very hard. The same logic applies to skin, vision, hearing. These systems degrade not because something is wrong, but because nothing was ever assigned to keep them intact indefinitely. Humans interpret this as betrayal because consciousness outlasts structural integrity. The mind continues to expect performance long after the body has shifted priorities. Other animals rarely experience this mismatch. Their decline aligns more closely with loss of function and death. Human decline stretches out, and stretching reveals every weakness. Modern life amplifies this effect. Artificial light disrupts repair cycles. Constant nutrition removes metabolic resets. Sedentary behavior weakens systems built for movement. The body continues making short-term trade-offs in an environment that never returns to baseline. Aging accelerates, not because humans are fragile, but because the system never gets relief. Once again, this circles back to the original imbalance. Humans became cognitively complex without becoming biologically durable. We built tools, medicine, and culture to extend life, but the body itself remains largely unchanged. And so humans age in fragments. One system compensates for another until it cannot. The heart works harder as vessels stiffen. Muscles stabilize joints that cartilage can no longer protect. Memory strategies compensate for declining recall. Adaptation delays collapse but increases strain. Aging feels cruel because it is adaptive, not catastrophic. The body is not failing all at once. It is adjusting continuously to damage it no longer fully repairs. This is the human condition. Prolonged maintenance mode, and the deeper implication is unsettling. If aging is the result of trade-offs made for early survival and rapid adaptation, then it is not something evolution is motivated to fix. The pain exists because evolution already succeeded, which raises the next question we cannot avoid. If aging is not a mistake, and not a disease, then what exactly did humans gain that made this kind of long, uneven decline worth it? And why do some animals manage longevity without paying the same price? A difference that leads us directly into how metabolism, growth rate, and energy allocation shape the entire lifespan from the very beginning. And where the human pattern begins to look less like bad luck and more like a very specific evolutionary bargain that continues to extract payment year after year, even as the body keeps moving forward, adapting just enough to remain functional, but never enough to fully escape the slow accumulation of damage that defines what it means to grow old as a human. And it is there, at that foundational level of energy use and biological pacing, where the next layer of this story waits. Because once we understand how humans burn through their biological budget faster than many other animals, the rest of the pattern begins to fall into place, leading us to the quiet mechanism that determines not just how long a body lasts, but how gracefully or how painfully it does so. When we look at how energy is spent across a lifetime, rather than how long that lifetime appears on paper, every organism lives on a biological budget. Not money, not calories alone, but usable energy that can be allocated toward growth, repair, reproduction, and defense. spend more in one place and another place receives less. No species escapes this accounting. Humans spend heavily early. From birth, the human brain consumes an extraordinary share of energy. Even as infants, our brains demand resources that other animals never allocate. Growth is fast, neural wiring is dense, learning is constant. The body diverts energy toward cognition, coordination, and social processing because these traits increase survival in complex groups. But energy spent on the brain is energy not spent on long-term maintenance. Many long-lived animals follow the opposite strategy. They grow slowly. Their brains develop steadily but modestly. Their metabolism remains low. Repair mechanisms are prioritized over speed. Cells divide carefully. Errors are corrected thoroughly. Life unfolds at a slower pace, but the structure holds. Humans chose acceleration. High metabolism fuels adaptability, but it also produces waste. Reactive oxygen species accumulate. Cellular components suffer microdamage with every energetic transaction. Over time, cleanup systems fall behind. This is not because they fail, but because they were never sized for decades of high output. The result is cumulative strain. Human cells respond by lowering standards. They allow imperfect proteins to persist. They tolerate damaged mitochondria. They silence genes rather than repair them. These decisions preserve short-term function at the expense of long-term integrity. Again, this is not malfunction. It is strategy. Other animals with long lifespans evolved strict quality control. Naked mole rats, for example, maintain protein stability far longer than humans. Certain birds repair DNA with exceptional accuracy. Large mammals like whales reduce cancer risk by duplicating protective genes. Their longevity is built in from the start. Human longevity is improvised. We live long because culture, cooperation, and technology extend survival. The body follows reluctantly, adapting just enough to keep pace. But adaptation is not redesign. It is patchwork. This is why aging in humans feels noisy. There are symptoms, signals, sensations. The body communicates distress because systems are negotiating constantly. Pain emerges not because something has broken completely, but because compensation is active. Pain is information. Other animals experience less of it in old age because decline is steeper and shorter. Function drops closer to death. There is less time spent in partial failure. Humans occupy that middle ground for decades, and this leads to another layer of suffering, unique to humans: expectation. We expect continuity. We expect the body to behave tomorrow as it did yesterday. Animals do not hold this expectation. They respond moment to moment. Humans remember better days and anticipate future ones. Aging disrupts that narrative. The body changes faster than identity can adjust. This psychological friction intensifies physical decline. Stress hormones rise. Sleep quality drops. Repair slows further. The feedback loop tightens. Aging accelerates not just biologically, but perceptually. Once again, the central question surfaces, unchanged. Why does this process appear harsher in humans than in other animals? Because humans are caught between two timelines. The evolutionary timeline that optimized us for early success, and the cultural timeline that extends life far beyond those original parameters. Other animals live inside one timeline. Humans live between them, and the space between timelines is uncomfortable. Medical intervention widens it further. We treat disease without altering underlying design. We replace parts, manage symptoms, extend survival. But the foundational trade-offs remain. The body continues allocating energy as it always has, prioritizing immediate function over perfect repair. So aging persists, stretched thin across longer years. This is why no single treatment reverses aging. There is no single failure to fix. Aging is distributed across systems because it originates from distributed trade-offs. Speed versus stability. Growth versus maintenance. Adaptability versus durability. Humans leaned hard toward adaptability, and adaptability does not age gracefully, which brings us to the most unsettling comparison of all. Some animals not only live long, but remain functional until very late. Their decline is brief. Their systems remain synchronized. Humans, by contrast, experience extended desynchronization. The mind, the body, and the environment fall out of alignment. This desynchronization is the true cost of human longevity. It explains why aging feels unfair, why it feels like something is going wrong rather than something ending, why decline arrives in stages instead of a single arc, and why so much of human suffering in old age is not about death itself, but about living too long in a body that no longer agrees with the story the mind is still telling. And if that is true, then the final layer of this question is not biological at all. It is existential. If humans were never meant to age well, and if aging is the predictable outcome of choices that made us who we are, then what does it mean to keep extending life without addressing the underlying mismatch? And whether the future of human longevity lies in repairing the body to match the mind, or in learning how to live with a form that was never designed for comfort in decline, because that decision whether to redesign the body or redefine aging itself will determine not just how long humans live, but how they experience the years they have left. And that is where this story moves next, toward the question of whether aging is something to be solved, accepted, or fundamentally reimagined. When the question shifts from why humans age so badly to what humans are now trying to do about it, often without realizing the deeper problem they are touching. Modern science approaches aging as if it were an enemy that appeared late in life. Wrinkles, weakness, disease, decline, but aging did not arrive at the end. It was present from the beginning, embedded in how the human body allocates effort. Most interventions aim at symptoms, replace joints, regulate hormones, remove damaged cells, extend organ function. These actions can relieve suffering, and they matter, but they do not change the underlying logic. The body continues to prioritize short-term stability over long-term repair. It always has. This is why aging resists simple solutions. If you improve one system, another compensates. If you suppress inflammation, immune defense weakens. If you enhance cell division, cancer risk rises. If you slow metabolism, adaptability drops. Every correction introduces a new imbalance, because the system was never designed to be fully corrected. Other long-lived animals avoided this trap by evolving conservatively. Their biology commits early to durability. Humans committed to flexibility. Once that path was chosen, reversing it became difficult, and yet humans keep trying, not because success is guaranteed, but because awareness demands response. Humans do not tolerate prolonged decline quietly. We analyze it, measure it, attempt to control it. Aging becomes a problem to be solved, rather than a phase to be passed through. This mindset itself adds pressure. The body senses constant demand: improve, recover, perform, maintain. But demand without redesign increases strain. The result is a strange paradox. Efforts to resist aging can accelerate the experience of aging by keeping the body in a state of continuous intervention. Rest becomes rare. Repair windows shrink. This contrasts sharply with animals whose aging is largely passive. They do not fight decline. They yield when capacity drops. Their systems downshift together. Humans resist downshifting, and resistance stretches the decline. Here, the emotional cost becomes clear. Human aging hurts not only because of physical damage, but because of misalignment between expectation and reality. We expect control because we control so much else. When the body refuses that control, frustration compounds pain. And once again, the same question echoes underneath everything. Why did humans evolve a level of awareness that makes aging so psychologically difficult? Because awareness was useful long before it became burdensome. It helped humans anticipate danger, plan ahead, remember patterns, teach offspring. That same awareness now tracks deterioration with precision. It notices loss early. It counts what is gone. No other species does this in the same way. This makes human aging uniquely narrated. We tell stories about it, compare stages, label decades, measure decline. The story grows louder as the body weakens, and the louder the story, the harder it is to accept the design constraints beneath it. At this point, it becomes clear that human aging is not a single failure, but a collision between biology, cognition, and culture. Biology sets limits, cognition notices them, culture pushes against them. The friction between these layers produces the experience we call aging. Other animals live mostly within biology. Humans live in the tension between all three. That tension explains why aging feels personal, why it feels unfair, why it feels like something went wrong rather than something completed. Humans were never meant to feel neutral about decline, because neutrality would have reduced early life vigilance. Anxiety had value. It still does, but at a cost. And so the question evolves again. If human aging is the consequence of trade-offs that made intelligence, cooperation, and culture possible, then the suffering associated with aging is not accidental. It is the shadow cast by traits that once ensured survival. This realization is uncomfortable because it removes the idea of a fix. There may be improvements, extensions, delays, but no clean resolution unless the underlying design is altered. That alteration would not be minor. It would involve changing how energy is spent, how cells repair, how growth is regulated. In effect, it would require choosing durability over adaptability, and that choice would change what it means to be human. So the question becomes less about adding years and more about deciding what kind of organism humans want to be going forward. A species that continues extending life within an old framework, accepting prolonged decline as the price of awareness. Or a species that attempts a fundamental redesign, risking unknown consequences in exchange for stability. Neither path is simple. Neither is free of cost. And this is where the comparison to other animals matters most. Not as a source of envy, but as a mirror. They show what longevity looks like when it is designed in from the start. Humans show what longevity looks like when it is borrowed, extended by intelligence rather than biology. Borrowed things always come with interest, and as humans continue to live longer, that interest accumulates. More years lived in partial function. More time spent adapting rather than thriving. More awareness, watching the system negotiate its own limits, which leads us to the quiet truth beneath all of this. Human aging feels worse than animal aging, because humans are not just bodies that age. They are minds that remember what the body used to be, and cultures that refuse to stop asking more of it. And as long as that gap remains, the experience of aging will continue to feel like a slow betrayal rather than a natural closure, a process that stretches out not because it is meant to, but because humans keep finding ways to delay the end without resolving the imbalance at the center. An imbalance that began the moment evolution prioritized intelligence over durability, a decision that solved immediate problems while quietly planting the conditions for a much longer, more complicated decline. One that we are still living through now, and that sets the stage for the final question this topic cannot avoid, which is not whether humans age badly compared to other animals, but whether aging badly is the unavoidable cost of becoming what humans are. And if so, what that means for the future of a species that refuses to stop extending its own lifespan, even as the body continues to signal, again and again, that it was never built for this kind of endurance. And that realization brings us to the last place we need to look, where aging intersects not with biology or culture, but with choice, because once a species becomes aware of its own design limits, the question is no longer what evolution did, but what will be done next. When a species becomes aware of its own design limits, the question is no longer what evolution did, but what will be done next. At that point, aging stops being a passive process. It becomes a decision space. No other animal reaches this space. They live, decline, and disappear without questioning the structure they were given. Humans crossed a threshold where biology is no longer accepted as final. Awareness turns limits into problems, and problems invite intervention. This is where human aging separates completely from animal aging. Animals age within their design. Humans age against theirs. The moment humans learned to extend life, they created a new tension. Survival was no longer enough. Quality became a demand. Duration became negotiable. The body, however, did not receive the memo. It continues operating under rules written for a much shorter existence. So humans begin to layer solutions on top of constraints. Medicine compensates for failure. Technology offsets weakness. Lifestyle strategies attempt to slow damage. These efforts work, but only partially. They stretch the system rather than transform it. Stretching reveals stress. This is why modern aging feels heavier than historical aging. In the past, decline often aligned more closely with death. Now decline can last decades. The body survives in compromised states that were once rare. Pain is managed. Failure is postponed. Awareness remains active. The result is prolonged negotiation with limitation. And here, another contrast with animals becomes clear. Long-lived animals that age well do not negotiate. Their systems remain synchronized until late life. Function declines together. Humans experience fragmentation. One system adapts while another collapses. The mind plans while the body resists. This fragmentation produces a unique form of fatigue. It is not exhaustion from effort. It is exhaustion from maintenance. Humans spend increasing energy simply keeping things from getting worse. Movement becomes calculated. Recovery becomes slow. Every action carries consequence. The body demands attention constantly, and attention is a limited resource. Other animals are spared this phase. This is why human aging often feels unfair rather than inevitable. It does not arrive cleanly. It intrudes. It interrupts identity. It forces renegotiation of habits, roles, and expectations long before life ends. And the longer humans extend lifespan without redesign, the more common this experience becomes. Which brings us back, once more, to the central question, now sharpened by everything that came before. Why do humans age so badly compared to other animals? Not because human biology is weak, but because it was never meant to support what humans asked it to become. Humans evolved to be adaptable, not durable, clever, not stable, fast, not long-lasting. Those traits solved immediate problems and unlocked intelligence, culture, and cooperation. Aging is the delayed invoice. Other animals avoided this invoice by choosing slower paths. Humans chose acceleration, and once acceleration became embedded in biology, there was no simple way back. The body could not be retrofitted easily. So humans learned to extend life externally rather than rebuild it internally. This strategy works, but it carries cost. Aging stretches. The experience becomes heavier with time, not because death is approaching, but because the body is being asked to function far beyond the window it was optimized for. And this is the quiet truth beneath the comparison. Humans do not age worse by accident. They age worse because they asked more of life than their biology was prepared to give. And instead of redesigning the system, they chose to keep extending it, which means the future of human aging will not be decided by how long humans can live, but by whether they choose to remain a species that borrows time from a body built for less, or one that fundamentally alters what a human body is allowed to be. A decision that will determine not just the length of life, but whether the years gained feel like continuation or endurance, and that question remains open, unresolved, and unfolding. Even now, as this thought settles and the body relaxes, an attention begins to drift, because the story does not end with an answer, but with a condition, one that continues to apply as long as humans keep living beyond the limits. Evolution originally set, and as long as that gap exists, aging will continue to feel the way it does, not as a clean closing chapter, but as a long, uneven middle that stretches forward, asking quietly what will be done next, when that long, uneven middle becomes the dominant experience of being human, rather than a brief transition toward the end. At that point, aging stops being something that happens later. It becomes something that shapes behavior early. Humans begin preparing for decline decades before it fully arrives. Exercise shifts from play to preservation. Diet becomes regulation. Sleep becomes repair. The body is treated less like a vehicle for exploration and more like a system that must be carefully managed to prevent breakdown. No other animal lives this way. Animals respond to the present. Humans live in anticipation of loss. That anticipation changes how energy is spent, not just biologically, but psychologically. Worry itself consumes resources. Stress hormones rise. Recovery slows. The body absorbs the cost of vigilance, and this creates a feedback loop. The more humans fear aging, the more they attempt to control it. The more they attempt to control it, the more attention is directed toward the body's limitations. The more attention those limitations receive, the louder they become. Aging accelerates in perception, even when it does not accelerate in tissue. This is one reason human aging feels harsher than animal aging. It is constantly monitored, measured, compared. Animals do not compare their present bodies to their past ones. Memory turns aging into a narrative. Every ache has a reference point. Every loss has a before. And because humans are social, aging becomes visible. Faces change in mirrors and photographs. Strength declines in comparison to peers. Cultural standards define what is considered too early for deterioration. Shame enters the process. Fear follows. This social amplification does not exist for other animals. Their decline is private. Human decline is public, which brings us to another subtle but critical difference. Humans age in environments that constantly remind them of what youth looks like. Media, advertising, technology, images of strength, speed, smoothness, and vitality are everywhere. Aging bodies are placed next to idealized ones repeatedly. The contrast sharpens pain. In nature, animals age among others, aging at similar rates. Humans age in a culture obsessed with minimizing visible decline. This mismatch deepens dissatisfaction and increases stress, which feeds directly back into biological wear. Once again, the body pays for awareness. This makes it tempting to believe that aging would feel easier if humans simply accepted it. But acceptance alone cannot undo the structural mismatch. Even in cultures that respect elders, the body still degrades unevenly. Joints still fail early. Energy still drains unpredictably. Awareness still notices. Acceptance may soften the experience, but it does not change the design. And that design keeps returning us to the same truth. Human aging is not primarily about time. It is about imbalance. An imbalance between how long humans now live and how long the body was optimized to function smoothly. An imbalance between cognitive endurance and physical durability. An imbalance between cultural expectations and biological constraints. Other animals maintain balance by aligning lifespan with design. Humans broke that alignment. And yet, humans are unlikely to reverse course. The same traits that cause this problem, intelligence, foresight, cooperation, also prevent resignation. Humans will continue to extend life, improve medicine, and search for interventions, not because success is guaranteed, but because stopping would feel like surrender. So the future of human aging will likely be incremental, not transformative. But the core pattern may remain: prolonged maintenance, uneven breakdown, sustained awareness. Unless something fundamental changes, that change would not come from treating symptoms. It would come from altering priorities at the cellular level. Slower metabolism, more conservative growth, enhanced repair accuracy, reduced early life speed in exchange for long-term stability. In other words, a different kind of human. This possibility raises questions far beyond biology. Would such a species think differently? Adapt more slowly? Lose the edge that made humans dominant? Durability has costs too. The animals that age well often live cautiously, slowly. With limited plasticity, humans chose the opposite path. So perhaps the comparison to other animals is misleading in one crucial way. It frames aging as a flaw rather than a consequence. Humans did not age badly by mistake. They aged in alignment with what they valued most at the time: rapid learning, adaptability, social complexity. The pain appears later because the benefits appeared early. Seen this way, human aging is not a malfunction but a delayed echo of success. A reminder that no strategy is free, that every advantage carries deferred cost. Other animals pay their costs up front by limiting complexity. Humans deferred payment into old age. And now, with lifespans extended, that bill is being paid in full view. This reframing does not remove suffering, but it changes its meaning. Aging stops being a personal failure or a biological betrayal. It becomes evidence of the path humans took, evidence that intelligence came before durability. That awareness outpaced structure, and perhaps that is why aging feels uniquely human. It is the price of knowing what is happening while it happens, of remembering how things once were, of imagining how they could have been different. Animals are spared this comparison. Humans are not, which leads to a final, quieter observation. Despite all the difficulty, humans continue to form meaning, relationships, and insight deep into aging. The body weakens, but perspective often deepens. This too is part of the trade-off. Aging bodies carry accumulated understanding that young bodies cannot. Evolution may not have optimized for comfort in decline, but it allowed continuity of knowledge. So the question of why humans age so badly compared to other animals does not end with deficiency. It ends with contrast. Humans linger, observe, and interpret. Neither path is objectively better. They are simply different outcomes of different priorities. And once this is understood, the comparison shifts. Instead of asking why humans fail where animals succeed, the question becomes why humans chose a path that made this kind of aging inevitable, and whether, knowing what we know now, the future will continue to extend a design built for less, or whether a new balance will be sought, one that aligns awareness with durability rather than letting them drift further apart. A balance that would redefine not just how humans age, but what it means to live a long life at all, a question that does not demand an answer tonight, but lingers quietly, doing what all unresolved questions do best, remaining present without urgency, allowing the body to rest while the mind loosens its grip, and letting the thought fade into the background, unfinished, still open, waiting for whatever comes next. When the thought remains open long enough that it no longer demands resolution. Only space. At that stage, the comparison between humans and other animals stops feeling accusatory. It becomes explanatory. Animals do not age better because they solved a problem humans failed to solve. They age differently because they never created the same problem in the first place. Their lives are narrower. Their roles are clearer. Their bodies are built to complete a limited arc and then stop. Humans expanded the arc without rebuilding the frame. This expansion changed everything. Childhood lengthened. Dependency deepened. Learning replaced instinct. Culture replaced adaptation speed. The body stayed largely the same while the life built around it grew heavier, more complex, more demanding. Aging is where that mismatch becomes impossible to ignore. The human body carries decades of accumulated signals telling it to adapt, respond, perform. It does not know how to transition gracefully into irrelevance because irrelevance was never part of the plan. Older humans mattered. They remembered roots, seasons, stories, threats. Their value did not vanish when physical strength declined, so the body lingered. But lingering without redesign creates friction. This is why human aging often feels like a negotiation rather than a decline. The body does not simply shut systems down. It keeps them running at reduced capacity. It reroutes function. It compensates. It delays. Every delay buys time, but also introduces imbalance. Other animals rarely experience this prolonged in-between, and the longer this in-between lasts, the more attention it draws. Humans begin to identify themselves with decline. Age becomes an identity rather than a phase. Numbers replace states. Milestones replace sensations. The body is no longer just lived in, it is monitored. Monitoring changes experience. When every sensation is interpreted through the lens of age, the body becomes a source of constant feedback. Is this normal? Is this early? Is this permanent? They amplify awareness. Awareness, once again, is double-edged. It helped humans survive unpredictability. It now magnifies deterioration. The same capacity that allowed humans to plan long lives makes the experience of decline heavier. This is not an argument against awareness. It is an observation about cost. Animals pay their cost in limited adaptability. Humans pay theirs in prolonged decline. Neither option is painless. The important distinction is that humans often interpret aging as a failure to maintain youth, rather than as the natural consequence of a life optimized for something else. Youth was never meant to last. It was meant to get the system established. What followed was always improvisation. The improvisation worked. Humans dominated environments, built tools, passed knowledge, extended life. But improvisation leaves rough edges. Aging is where those edges are felt. And yet, despite all of this, humans continue to push forward. They push because decline does not erase purpose. Even as the body weakens, humans contribute in ways animals do not. Guidance, perspective, memory, emotional regulation, pattern recognition. These functions remain valuable even when physical systems falter. This is another reason human aging stretches out. The system still has something to offer. Evolution allowed that offering to persist, even if the container degraded. So when comparing humans to other animals, the The real difference is not quality of aging, but distribution of value across time. Animals concentrate value early and exit cleanly. Humans distribute value unevenly and linger. Lingering has a cost, but it also has meaning, and this brings the comparison full circle. Humans age badly compared to other animals because humans asked more of life than most animals ever needed to. They asked for memory, continuity, foresight, and culture. This does not mean aging is good. It means it is coherent. Once coherence is seen, resentment softens. The body is no longer an enemy. It is a structure doing what it was built to do for far longer than originally intended. Every ache becomes less of a betrayal and more of a signal that the system is still working, still adapting. This perspective does not remove pain, but it reframes it. Pain becomes information rather than injustice. And in that reframing, something subtle happens. The comparison to other animals loses its sting. Their clean decline is no longer enviable. Human aging is no longer embarrassing. It is simply the consequence of a different path. A path that prioritizes speed, intelligence, and connection over durability. A path that worked. Whether that path will continue unchanged is an open question. Humans now possess the tools to intervene at levels evolution never anticipated. Gene regulation, cellular reprogramming, metabolic control. These interventions may one day realign durability with awareness, or they may introduce new trade-offs. What matters for now is recognizing that human aging is not random, not a glitch, and not uniquely cursed. It is patterned. It follows from choices made long before individuals existed. Understanding that pattern does not fix aging, but it removes the illusion that something went wrong. Nothing went wrong. Something was chosen. And that choice echoes forward into every decade lived beyond the design window. As this understanding settles, the urgency around comparison fades. There is only the task of living well within the structure humans inherited, while deciding, slowly and collectively, whether that structure will remain the same or be altered in the future. That decision does not need to be made tonight. For now, it is enough to let the question remain unanswered, to allow the body to rest without demanding solutions, to recognize that aging feels the way it does because humans are what they are, and that awareness itself, though heavy at times, is also the reason this question can be asked at all. And as attention drifts and the need for resolution loosens, the comparison softens into context, the context into background, and the background into quiet. Because the story does not end with a conclusion, but with understanding, and understanding does not require effort to hold on to. It remains whether or not it is actively considered, which is why this is a good place to slow down, to stop pushing the thought forward, because what comes next is not another argument or explanation, but simply the continuation of being, within a body that carries its history honestly, and a mind that can finally let the question rest, knowing it does not need to be answered right now. When and a mind that can finally let the question rest, knowing it does not need to be answered right now. When awareness stops pushing forward and begins to turn inward instead. At that moment, something subtle shifts. Not resolution, not acceptance, just a loosening of pressure. The body does not suddenly feel better. Aging does not pause. Pain does not disappear. What changes is the relationship between attention and sensation. The body continues its slow negotiation with time, but the mind steps back from demanding explanations. This distance matters, because much of what makes human aging feel unbearable is not the damage itself, but the constant interpretation of damage. Every stiffness becomes a signal. Every delay becomes a warning. The body is no longer simply experienced. It is evaluated. Animals do not evaluate their decline. Humans do. That evaluation keeps systems active that would otherwise quiet down. Stress responses remain engaged. Cortisol rises. Sleep fragments. Repair slows further. The mind's effort to understand aging feeds the very processes that accelerate it. This is one of the least discussed aspects of human aging. Interpretation amplifies deterioration, not metaphorically. Biologically, the nervous system responds to perceived threat, not just physical injury. When aging is interpreted as loss, danger, or failure, the body reacts as if under continuous stress. Over time, this stress reshapes hormonal balance, immune behavior, and metabolic regulation. Other animals are spared this layer entirely. They experience decline without narrative. Humans experience decline with memory, comparison, and projection layered on top. The body does not distinguish between physical threat and existential anxiety. Both activate the same systems. Both draw from the same limited reserves. And so, the more humans think about aging, the heavier it becomes. This does not mean thinking is a mistake. It means thinking has a cost when applied to a system that was never built for prolonged self-monitoring. Which brings us back, once again, to the deeper structure of the problem. Human aging is not just biological. It is cognitive and cultural. It is the result of a body designed for action paired with a mind designed for reflection. Reflection outlived action. As physical capacity declines, mental capacity often remains sharp enough to notice every discrepancy. The body slows. The mind tracks the slowing. The gap widens. This gap is where discomfort lives. Other animals do not live inside this gap. Their awareness is tightly coupled to capacity. When one fades, so does the other. Humans uncoupled awareness from physical function, and aging stretches into that space. This is why the later decades of human life often feel strangely suspended. Not fully active. Not fully finished. A long plateau of adjustment where the body is no longer expanding capability, but not yet withdrawing entirely. Aging becomes a state rather than a phase, and states invite management. Humans respond by optimizing. Supplements, routines, therapies, tracking, metrics. The body becomes a project. Maintenance replaces exploration. Prevention replaces spontaneity. These efforts are rational. They extend function. They reduce suffering. But they also keep attention anchored to limitation. Every intervention is a reminder that something needs to be managed. Animals do not manage aging. They move until they cannot. Humans manage because they can. This ability to manage prolongs life. But it also prolongs the awareness of decline. The system remains functional, but never free from oversight. The mind stays engaged long after the body would otherwise rest. This engagement is both the strength and the burden of human longevity. And here, another contrast becomes clear. Animals that age well often live lives with lower cognitive demand. Their environments change slowly. Their roles remain stable. Humans live in environments that shift rapidly. Technology, culture, and expectations change faster than biology can adapt. The body ages inside a world that never stops accelerating. This acceleration magnifies aging. Skills become obsolete. Roles dissolve. Identity tied to capability erodes faster than tissue. Aging becomes not just physical decline, but relevance decline. No animal faces this. Human aging is contextual. It happens inside a moving target. And so the question deepens again, not as curiosity, but as pressure. How is a body designed for survival in stable conditions supposed to age inside a world that constantly demands adaptation? The answer is visible everywhere. It ages unevenly. It compensates. It burns out systems early. It holds together just enough to continue functioning. This is not failure. It is load-bearing strain. When the body is asked to adapt continuously for decades, without redesign, something has to give. Repair slows, margins shrink, small inefficiencies accumulate into noticeable decline. The body is not collapsing, it is economizing. Every system begins making choices about what to preserve and what to let go. Fine motor control fades before gross movement. Speed fades before strength. Recovery fades before basic function. These priorities reflect what the system considers essential. Essential for what? For staying alive, not for staying comfortable. Animals age according to the same logic, but over shorter spans. Humans stretch that logic thin across many years, which is why aging in humans often feels like a slow erosion rather than a clean transition. And yet, despite everything, the system continues. Breathing remains automatic. Circulation persists. Consciousness wakes each day. The body adapts again and again, even as options narrow. This persistence is rarely acknowledged. Human aging is often framed as loss, but it is equally persistence under constraint. The body continues solving problems with fewer resources. That is not nothing. And perhaps This is why the comparison to animals ultimately misses the point. It assumes aging should be evaluated by smoothness or efficiency, but humans never optimized for efficiency alone. They optimized for resilience in complexity. Complexity ages poorly, but complexity also allows reflection, meaning, and continuity across generations. The same system that produces uneven decline also produces insight, teaching, and memory that outlast physical strength. So when the mind finally lets the question rest, not because it is answered, but because it no longer needs to dominate attention, something else becomes possible. The body continues aging, but the experience of aging softens slightly, not because conditions improved, but because the demand for explanation relaxed. This relaxation does not stop decline. It reduces friction, and reduced friction conserves energy, which brings us quietly back to the core reality beneath all of this. Human aging feels worse than animal aging because humans carry more memory, more expectation, more unfinished narratives inside bodies that were never built to carry such weight indefinitely. Once that is seen clearly, the question loses urgency. It becomes context rather than problem. The body continues its slow accounting. The mind no longer insists on reconciliation. And in that space, where explanation gives way to observation, where comparison fades into background awareness, the system does what it has always done best under reduced demand, which is to settle, to downshift, to conserve what remains, and that settling does not require resolution, only time, and time continues whether or not it is understood. And that is where the story remains open, but stretching quietly forward, waiting to be entered again from another angle, another layer, another depth, when attention no longer clings to the idea of decline, and instead begins to notice how the body adjusts itself moment by moment. Adjustment is constant. It does not announce itself. It does not feel heroic. It happens quietly, beneath awareness, as systems redistribute effort to keep things running. When energy becomes limited, the body reallocates. It preserves what keeps you alive first. Circulation, respiration, basic neural function. Everything else becomes negotiable. Precision fades before strength. Endurance fades before stability. The body simplifies its goals. This simplification is not random. It follows a hierarchy shaped by millions of years of survival pressure. Comfort ranks low. Efficiency ranks higher. Persistence ranks highest. Animals follow the same hierarchy, but their timelines are shorter. Their simplification happens closer to the end. That is the source of friction. A simplified body inside a complex environment feels inadequate. Tasks that once required no thought begin demanding planning. Recovery becomes visible. Fatigue arrives earlier and leaves later. The body is still functioning, but the margin is thinner. Margin is what youth provides. Youth is not strength alone. It is excess capacity, the ability to absorb error without consequence, the ability to waste energy and recover quickly. Aging removes that excess. Systems begin operating closer to their limits. Operating near limits feels stressful. The body compensates by reducing variability. Movement patterns become conservative. Risk-taking declines. Novelty becomes expensive. The system favors predictability, because predictability conserves energy. Animals do this instinctively. Humans resist it culturally. Human environments reward novelty, speed, and constant engagement. Aging bodies struggle not because they cannot adapt at all, but because adaptation is demanded continuously without sufficient recovery. The body is asked to remain flexible while operating with reduced margin. This mismatch accelerates wear. And again, the comparison to animals highlights the difference. Animals age within environments that demand less over time. Humans often face environments that demand more. Careers peak later, social roles expand, cognitive load increases, responsibility accumulates. Aging unfolds under increasing pressure. This pressure feeds back into biology. Chronic stress alters hormone levels. Sleep quality drops. Repair windows shorten. The body enters a state of low-grade alarm that was never meant to persist for decades. Alarm is useful short-term. Long-term, it erodes. Animals rarely live in sustained alarm. Their threats are acute and resolved quickly. Human threats are abstract and persistent. Financial uncertainty, social evaluation, time scarcity, anticipated loss. These threats activate the same systems as physical danger. The body does not know the difference. So, human aging is shaped not only by internal design, but by the kind of pressures humans created for themselves. Pressure extends lifespan externally, while compressing internal capacity. This is why some humans age faster than others, despite similar genetics. The ledger is not just biological, it is contextual. Load matters, and load accumulates. As load increases, the body prioritizes survival over optimization. Systems that once aimed for peak performance settle for adequacy. Adequacy becomes the new goal. Adequacy feels like loss when compared to earlier abundance. But adequacy is not failure. It is the body choosing sustainability over excess. The problem is not the choice. The problem is the comparison. Animals do not compare adequacy to youth. Humans do. Comparison reintroduces tension. When the mind stops comparing, the body's adjustments feel less antagonistic. Stiffness becomes information rather than insult. Fatigue becomes signal rather than verdict. The system is not betraying, it is communicating. Communication is constant. Pain is one form, discomfort is another, delay is another. Animals respect boundaries instinctively. Humans negotiate them. Negotiation extends function, but it also keeps the conversation going. The body is never allowed to settle fully into its simplified mode. It is constantly pulled back toward earlier standards. This tug of war is exhausting, and exhaustion compounds aging, which brings us again to the same structural insight. Human aging feels worse because humans do not allow aging to complete any phase cleanly. Decline is stretched, interrupted, modified, delayed, and monitored. The system never gets closure. Animals receive closure quickly. Closure is efficient. Humans resist closure because awareness refuses to disengage. There is always something unfinished. Another obligation, another role, another memory that insists on relevance. So the body keeps negotiating. This negotiation is not endless, but it is long enough to feel heavy. Years pass inside it. Decades. Sometimes the body adapts again and again, lowering thresholds, redefining normal, conserving what remains. This process does not look graceful. It looks messy, uneven, asymmetric, but it works. Most humans do not collapse suddenly. They persist, they adjust, they reframe, they continue within narrowing parameters. Persistence is underrated. In animals, persistence is short. In humans, persistence becomes a long practice. That practice shapes experience. Aging is not just what happens to tissue, it is what happens to identity under constraint. Identity resists change longer than tissue does, and resistance creates friction. When resistance softens, not because decline stopped, but because comparison eased, the system gains a small amount of relief. Relief does not reverse aging. It slows the subjective burden. Subjective burden matters. Two bodies with similar physical condition can experience aging very differently depending on how much internal conflict exists. Animals experience little conflict. Humans experience a lot. So, perhaps the most accurate comparison is not between human bodies and animal bodies, but between human minds and animal minds inside aging bodies. The difference lies there. Human minds outlive their body's original specifications. They remember peak capacity. They imagine future capacity. They notice decline early and often. Animals remain anchored to the present. Presence reduces suffering. This does not mean humans should abandon reflection. Reflection built civilization. But reflection applied to aging without limits creates strain. Limits are necessary. And this is where the question gently returns, not as demand, but as background hum. What would it mean for humans to age with less internal resistance? Even if biology remained unchanged, the answer is not philosophical, it is physiological. Reduced resistance reduces stress. Reduced stress conserves energy. Conserved energy supports repair. Animals achieve this automatically. Humans must learn it. Learning takes time, and time is what aging consumes, which is why this story does not rush toward conclusion. There is no solution waiting at the end. There is only understanding layered slowly enough that the body can remain calm while the mind follows along, allowing the comparison to soften further, allowing the question to recede into context, allowing attention to drift without needing to hold on to the thread tightly, because the thread remains whether or not it is actively grasped. And as that grasp loosens, the system continues doing what it has always done under reduced demand, settling incrementally, conserving what matters, letting go of what does not, and moving quietly forward, moment by moment, within a design that was never perfect, but has proven remarkably adaptable. Even now, as the thought fades slightly, and the space around it widens, and the story continues without pushing, waiting to be entered again from another depth, when the body is finally allowed to operate without being measured against an earlier version of itself. Without comparison, aging reveals a different texture. Not smoother, not easier, but quieter. The body still changes. Strength still fades. Recovery still slows, but the constant internal dialogue softens. Movements are no longer judged against memory. Sensations are no longer interpreted as warnings by default. The system is experienced rather than audited. This shift does not come from denial. It comes from reduced surveillance. Human bodies are rarely left unsupervised. They are tracked, optimized, corrected, reminded of what they used to do. Energy spent on vigilance is energy not available for repair. Animals do not audit their bodies. They inhabit them. Inhabitation changes experience. When the body is lived in rather than evaluated, signals lose their threat quality. Discomfort still exists, but it no longer escalates into alarm. Alarm recedes. Repair windows widen slightly. Sleep deepens. These changes are small, but small changes compound. Human aging accelerates when stress remains unresolved. Stress does not require catastrophe. It thrives on low-grade tension, expectation mismatch, anticipation, self-monitoring. These pressures accumulate quietly. Once pressure eases, even marginally, the system responds. This is not psychology overriding biology. It is biology responding to conditions. Hormonal balance shifts when vigilance drops. Inflammatory tone lowers. The nervous system spends more time in maintenance mode rather than defense. None of this stops aging. It alters how aging unfolds. Animals age under these conditions naturally. Humans rarely do. Human lives encourage constant orientation toward future tasks. The body becomes a means rather than a presence. Aging feels worse when the body is treated exclusively as an instrument whose performance is declining. When performance ceases to be the primary metric, the experience changes. This does not mean abandoning activity. It means changing relationship. The body is no longer pushed to match an outdated standard. It is allowed to set its own pace. Pace matters more than capacity. Capacity fluctuates. Pace stabilizes. Animals move at the pace their bodies allow. Humans often move at the pace their schedules demand. The conflict between these two rhythms generates strain. Strain ages tissue faster. And again, the comparison to animals clarifies the pattern. Animals age in environments that gradually reduce demand. Humans often age in environments that intensify it. Work becomes more complex. Responsibilities expand. Social roles multiply. Cognitive load increases even as physical margin decreases. The body carries this imbalance. Carrying imbalance for long periods produces uneven wear. This uneven wear is what humans experience as aging badly. Not collapse, but misalignment. Not failure, but friction. Friction generates heat. Heat accelerates breakdown. When friction decreases, wear slows. This is why humans who reduce internal resistance often report aging as less harsh, even without significant physical improvement. The body is not repaired. It is relieved. Relief matters. Animals live with built-in relief. They disengage when capacity drops. Humans struggle to disengage because meaning is tied to function. Letting go feels like loss of self. But self is not limited to output. Animals never confuse identity with productivity. Humans often do. This confusion amplifies aging. As function declines, identity feels threatened. Threat activates stress. Stress degrades tissue. The cycle tightens. Breaking the cycle requires decoupling identity from peak performance. That decoupling does not require resignation. It requires reframing. Reframing is cognitive, but its effects are physiological. Reduced stress changes internal chemistry. Changed chemistry alters repair dynamics. The body responds. Again, this is not cure. It is context. Context shapes experience, which returns us, once more, to the original comparison. Humans age worse than other animals not because their bodies are uniquely flawed, but because their minds extend pressure long after bodies need relief. Animals receive relief automatically. Humans must permit it. Permission is difficult in a culture that equates rest with failure and slowing with loss. Yet permission reduces internal load, and reduced load supports sustainability. Sustainability is the real issue. Animals sustain themselves until they cannot. Humans often push until systems fray. Pushing was advantageous early. It becomes costly later. Aging exposes this cost. When pushing eases, even slightly, the body regains some coherence. Systems synchronize better. Fatigue becomes less adversarial. Pain becomes less personal. The body is no longer an opponent. It becomes a partner negotiating limits. Negotiation is calmer than conflict. Conflict accelerates decline. Negotiation slows it. Animals never fight their limits. Humans often do. And this difference shapes the experience of aging more than any single biological mechanism, which leads to a quieter understanding. Aging feels worse in humans because humans resist it internally while extending it externally. The body is stretched in time, while the mind clings to earlier standards. When the mind loosens, the stretch remains, but the strain decreases. Decreased strain conserves energy. Conserved energy supports repair. Repair slows deterioration. None of this reverses time. It changes texture. Texture matters when time is long. Humans created long time. Other animals did not. So the comparison resolves not into envy, but into explanation. Animals age cleanly because their lives are simpler. Humans age messily because their lives are layered. Layered lives create layered aging. Understanding this does not remove difficulty. It removes confusion. Confusion is exhausting. Clarity, even uncomfortable clarity, reduces internal noise. Noise ages systems. Silence supports them. And silence does not require emptiness. It requires the absence of unnecessary demand. When demand drops, even briefly, the system recalibrates. This recalibration is subtle. It does not announce improvement. It feels like less resistance, less urgency, less need to prove continuity with the past. Continuity shifts inward. The body continues changing. The mind stops arguing with it. That alignment does not end aging. It makes it less violent. And perhaps that is the quiet lesson beneath the comparison with other animals. Humans cannot age like animals because humans are not animals in the same way anymore. They changed the conditions of living. Aging followed. But humans can age with less friction if they stop demanding that bodies designed for one purpose continue performing another indefinitely. This is not surrender. It is adaptation. Adaptation is what evolution rewarded most. And adaptation does not stop with youth. It continues, quietly, even now, as attention softens further, as internal pressure eases, as the need to extract conclusions relaxes, because the body does not require understanding to function, only conditions that allow it to do so, and when those conditions appear, even briefly, the system responds by settling into its current form with less resistance, less strain, and less noise. And that settling is not the end of the story, but another phase within it, one that does not demand explanation, only presence. And presence does not push forward. It remains, waiting without urgency, open to whatever comes next. When presence replaces pressure, and the body is no longer treated as a problem that needs to be solved. In that state, aging reveals another layer that often goes unnoticed. The body does not only decline, it reorganizes. Systems that once chased speed begin prioritizing stability. Reflexes soften, but coordination often improves. Raw strength fades, but efficiency increases. Movements become economical, not because the body is weaker, but because it no longer wastes effort. Animals age this way instinctively. Humans only notice it when they stop demanding youth-like output. Much of what is labeled aging badly is actually the discomfort of resisting this reorganization. The body is shifting strategy, but the mind keeps insisting on an outdated operating mode. That insistence creates friction. and friction feels like failure. When friction eases, the same physical state can feel dramatically different. The body still has limits, but those limits stop feeling punitive. They feel descriptive. Description carries less emotional weight than judgment. Judgment keeps stress circuits active. Description allows them to quiet down. And quiet is not passive. Quiet is where maintenance happens. Repair does not require motivation. It requires low interference. Human bodies evolved to repair themselves most effectively during periods of low vigilance. Sleep, rest, rhythmic movement, and predictable routines signal safety. Safety tells the nervous system it can redirect energy from defense toward maintenance. Animals live inside these signals naturally. Humans disrupt them constantly. Artificial light, irregular schedules, constant stimulation, and social comparison keep the nervous system partially engaged even at rest. Aging unfolds inside this background noise. Noise accelerates wear not by destroying tissue directly, but by preventing full recovery cycles. Recovery is not dramatic, it is cumulative. Miss it often enough, and decline becomes noticeable. This is why two humans with similar genetics and lifestyles can age very differently depending on their internal state. The body does not only track calories and movement, it tracks perceived safety. Animals perceive safety when threats are absent. Humans perceive threat in abstraction. Deadlines, evaluation, anticipation, memory. The body reacts as if danger is present. Over years, this reaction reshapes aging. This does not mean aging can be reversed by mindset. It means aging is shaped by conditions, not just by time. Conditions include internal ones. When internal conditions soften, aging does not stop, but it loses some of its sharpness. Sharpness is what makes it feel hostile. Blunt processes feel tolerable even when they are irreversible. Animals age bluntly. Humans often age sharply. Sharpness comes from tension. Tension is sustained effort against reality. Effort drains resources. Drained systems fail sooner. This pattern repeats everywhere. Muscles held in chronic tension fatigue faster. Joints under constant microguarding degrade unevenly. Sleep under vigilance fragments. Fragmented sleep slows repair. Slowed repair accelerates decline. None of this is mysterious. It is mechanical, yet humans often search for complex explanations because simplicity feels insufficient. But aging is not complex in mechanism. It is complex in experience because humans layer meaning onto sensation. Meaning intensifies experience. Animals experience sensation without narrative. Humans narrate sensation into identity. Identity resists change. Resistance costs energy. Energy spent resisting is energy not available for maintenance. Again, the same loop. When resistance drops, the loop loosens. The body does not improve dramatically. It stabilizes. Stabilization feels like relief when the alternative is constant struggle. Relief allows the system to settle into its current configuration. Settling reduces noise. Reduced noise improves efficiency. Efficiency slows deterioration. This is not optimization. It is alignment. Alignment between what the body can do and what the mind demands. Animals live aligned by default. Humans often do not. This misalignment is the hidden variable in human aging. It explains why some people appear to age better despite similar physical conditions. They are not escaping biology. They are cooperating with it. Cooperation is less costly than conflict. Conflict accelerates wear. Cooperation redistributes load. Redistribution keeps systems functional longer, even if peak capacity is gone. Peak capacity is temporary by design. Longevity was never meant to preserve peaks. It preserves continuity. Continuity is quieter. It does not announce itself. It is felt as the ability to keep going without collapse. Animals preserve continuity briefly. Humans preserve it for decades. Decades magnify everything. Small inefficiencies become visible. Small imbalances accumulate. Small stresses matter. This is why human aging feels like a slow accumulation rather than a single turning point. The body is not failing catastrophically. It is paying interest on long-term trade-offs. Those trade-offs began early. Fast growth, high plasticity, intense learning, social complexity, they paid off. Aging is the deferred cost. Animals chose lower interest plans. Humans chose higher risk, higher reward. Reward arrived early, cost arrives late. Understanding this does not make aging pleasant, but it makes it legible. Legibility reduces anxiety. Anxiety worsens outcomes. Again, the loop closes. When the mind no longer treats aging as an error to correct, the body is allowed to operate within its revised parameters. Revised does not mean diminished in every sense. It means different priorities: stability over speed, endurance over output, consistency over intensity. These priorities are not valued in youth-driven cultures, so they feel like loss. Animals value them implicitly. Humans must learn to. Learning takes time. Time is what aging provides. Ironically, the very process that creates discomfort also creates the opportunity to understand it. Animals do not gain this understanding. Humans do. Whether that understanding is used to reduce friction or to amplify frustration is a choice that emerges only because awareness persists. That persistence is the defining feature of human aging. It is what makes it heavier, but also what makes it meaningful. Meaning does not cancel pain. It contextualizes it. Context allows endurance. Endurance is how humans survive long arcs. Long arcs are what humans created. Aging is inseparable from that creation. When this is seen clearly, the comparison to animals loses its edge. There is no standard to meet. There is only a structure to inhabit. Inhabiting a structure well matters more than wishing for a different one. The body you are in is not defective. It is extended. Extended systems require gentler handling. Gentler handling conserves function. Conservation supports continuity. Continuity is enough, and when continuity is allowed to be enough, the constant push for explanation softens again. The narrative quiets, the system downshifts, and the experience of aging, while still present, becomes less antagonistic, less sharp, less demanding of immediate resolution, settling instead into a slow background process that does not need to be solved tonight. Only carried for now, while attention loosens further, and the story continues at its own pace, without urgency, without insistence, waiting quietly for the next place it naturally opens, when the pace finally matches what the body can sustain, rather than what memory insists it should sustain. At that point, aging stops being framed as loss alone and begins to register as transition. Not a clean one, not a ceremonial one, but a gradual shift in how effort is distributed. Effort becomes selective. The body no longer spends energy on everything equally. It invests in what keeps coherence intact. Balance over speed, breathing over force, rhythm over intensity. These are not sentimental adjustments. They are mechanical decisions made by systems under constraint. Animals make these decisions without reflection. Humans notice them and often resist them because resistance feels like loyalty to an earlier self. Loyalty, however, is expensive. It asks the body to perform beyond current margins. Margins matter more than capacity. Capacity can be impressive and still fragile. Margin is what absorbs shock. Aging reduces margin. The body responds by lowering risk. Lower risk looks like caution. Caution looks like weakness to a culture that equates vigor with value. Animals do not live inside that equation. Humans do. So humans experience aging not only as biological change, but as social displacement. What once earned approval no longer applies. Roles tied to speed, stamina, and novelty thin out. Roles tied to continuity, judgment, and steadiness emerge. But they are quieter and less celebrated. Quiet contributions feel invisible. Invisibility feels like erasure. Erasure activates stress. Stress feeds back into biology. Again, the same loop. When contribution is reframed, stress eases. When stress eases, systems stabilize. Stabilization does not restore youth. It preserves function. Preservation is underrated because it lacks spectacle. Animals preserve function until they do not. Humans preserve function while still being observed, evaluated, and compared. Comparison drains resources. It does not change outcomes. Removing comparison conserves energy. Maintenance does not reverse damage. It slows accumulation. Slowing accumulation stretches time without increasing strain. Stretching time without strain is the closest thing to aging well humans can realistically achieve without redesign. Redesign is not trivial. It would require altering developmental priorities, metabolic rates, repair accuracy, and growth patterns. Those changes would ripple through cognition, behavior, and adaptability. Animals that age well live cautiously by default. Humans became dominant by not being cautious. Dominance had benefits. Aging pays the cost. This is not moral. It is arithmetic. Energy in, energy out, errors tolerated, repairs deferred. Deferred repairs become features. Features become experience. Experience becomes story. The same mind that can frame suffering as meaningful can also magnify it into dread. Which direction it goes depends on how tightly the story is held. When the story loosens, experience simplifies. Simplification is not ignorance, it is efficiency. Efficiency conserves resources. Conserved resources matter more with age because buffers are thin. Thin buffers demand precision. Precision improves when noise drops. Noise drops when the need to perform fades. Performance is a social construct layered onto biology. Biology does not require applause. It requires conditions. Conditions include regularity, predictability, and low interference. Animals live inside these conditions. Humans must rebuild them intentionally. Intentional rebuilding is effortful at first. Over time, it becomes habitual. Habits reduce decision load. Reduced decision load conserves cognitive energy. Cognitive energy spared reduces physiological stress. Again, the same cascade. Nothing here is mystical. It is a chain of ordinary effects compounding over long time. Long time is the human experiment. Animals did not run it. Humans did. The results are mixed. Extraordinary achievements paired with extended decline. Neither can be separated from the other. Understanding that linkage reduces the urge to isolate aging as a defect. Defects invite fixes. Fixes invite disappointment. Disappointment invites frustration. Frustration invites stress. Stress invites wear. Removing the defect framing interrupts this chain. Aging becomes condition rather than accusation. Conditions are managed, not judged. Management is calmer than correction. Calm is biologically favorable. Favorable conditions do not stop entropy. They pace it. Pacing matters when time is long. Humans created long time. They must learn long pacing. Long pacing feels slow to a species built on acceleration. Slowness initially feels like loss. Later it feels like stability. Stability supports continuity. Continuity allows presence. Presence reduces rumination. Rumination taxes systems. Animals do not ruminate. Humans do. Rumination is the mental equivalent of revving an engine in neutral. It produces heat without movement. Heat degrades components. Reducing rumination cools the system. Cooling extends service life. Service life is not glamorous. It is functional. Functionality over long spans is the real metric of aging well. By that metric, many humans do better than they believe, because belief is shaped by comparison to an idealized youth that never included the cost of maintenance. Youth is subsidized by margin. Aging removes the subsidy. Paying full price feels unfair when the subsidy was assumed permanent. Animals never assume permanence. Humans do. Assumptions create shock when violated. Shock triggers stress. Stress accelerates decline. Adjusting assumptions reduces shock. Reduced shock eases stress. Again, the same loop unwinds. The body does not need optimism. It needs reduced load. Reduced load is achievable without denial. It requires changing what is asked of the system. Asking less of speed. More of steadiness. Less of novelty. More of rhythm. These shifts are not retreats. They are reallocations. Animals reallocate automatically. Humans negotiate. Negotiation can be gentle or adversarial. Gentler negotiations cost less. Cost matters over decades. Over decades, small savings add up. Savings preserve options. Options keep systems adaptable. Adaptability is the core human trait. It does not end with youth. It changes target, from expansion to conservation, from conquest to coherence. Coherence is quiet. Quiet does not trend. Quiet sustains. Sustaining is enough. And when sustaining is allowed to be enough, the mind relaxes its demand for exceptionalism, the body settles into its workable range, and the comparison to other animals becomes informational rather than evaluative, a way to see difference without turning difference into deficit, which allows the long middle to be lived rather than endured. Not because aging stopped being real, but because it stopped being fought at every turn, and in that reduced friction, the system finds a steadier rhythm, one that does not promise ease or reversal, only continuity under manageable conditions, which is all a system built for less can reasonably provide over extended time. And as that rhythm establishes itself, attention drifts further from analysis, less interested in verdicts, more willing to let processes unfold without constant supervision, and the story continues without pushing toward closure, opening quietly into the next layer whenever it naturally does, when continuity becomes more important than intensity, and the system quietly reorganizes around what it can sustain without strain. At that stage, aging stops feeling like a countdown and starts feeling like a redistribution. Energy is no longer scattered across competing demands. It gathers around essentials. The body simplifies not out of weakness, but out of efficiency. Efficiency emerges when excess is removed. Excess was useful early. It becomes expensive later. Animals shed excess automatically. Humans cling to it out of habit. Habit consumes resources long after its benefit fades. Letting go of habit frees capacity. Capacity is not only physical, it is attentional. Where attention goes, physiology follows. Attention anchored to loss tightens the system. Attention anchored to function steadies it. Steadiness reduces noise. Noise is costly. Cost accumulates over time. Time magnifies cost. That is the arithmetic behind aging. Nothing dramatic, just compounding. Animals experience compounding briefly. Humans experience it over long arcs. Long arcs expose small inefficiencies. Those inefficiencies feel personal, because humans identify with performance. Performance declines unevenly. Identity resists unevenness. Resistance generates friction. Friction heats systems. Heat accelerates wear. Cooling requires reducing friction, not forcing output. Forcing output is the reflex of a species shaped by acceleration. Acceleration delivered early success. It is poorly suited to late maintenance. Maintenance requires patience. Patience is undervalued. Animals practice patience without naming it. Humans must relearn it. Relearning is uncomfortable because it contradicts earlier training. Earlier training rewarded speed, novelty, and expansion. Aging demands consolidation. Consolidation is not regression. It is integration. Integrated systems are more stable. Stability reduces variance. Reduced variance lowers risk. Lower risk preserves function. It looks ordinary. Ordinary is often mistaken for decline. Animals accept ordinary as sufficient. Humans struggle because ordinary is socially invisible. Invisibility feels like erasure. Erasure threatens identity. Threat activates stress. Stress degrades tissue. Again, the loop. Breaking the loop does not require becoming invisible. It requires redefining visibility. Visibility can be presence rather than performance. Presence is low cost. Performance is high cost. Costs matter when budgets shrink. Budgets always shrink with age. Shrinking budgets require prioritization. Prioritization clarifies values. Values shift from expansion to continuity. Continuity is not static. It adapts slowly. Slow adaptation aligns with reduced margin. Alignment reduces accidents. Accidents accelerate decline. Animals avoid accidents by narrowing behavior. Humans avoid accidents by planning. Planning is useful but taxing. Excessive planning keeps the nervous system engaged. Engagement drains energy. Energy drained is energy unavailable for repair. Repair is what slows aging. Repair windows open under safety. Safety is signaled by predictability and rest. Rest is undervalued. Animals rest without guilt. Humans rest with justification. Justification keeps cognition active. Active cognition prevents full rest. Partial rest is inefficient. Inefficiency accumulates. Accumulation becomes experience. Experience becomes story. Story shapes expectation. When expectation relaxes, the system loosens. Loosening is not collapse, it is recalibration. Recalibration takes time. Time is available. Humans created long time. Long time demands gentle pacing. Gentle pacing feels countercultural. Countercultural choices invite scrutiny. Scrutiny increases stress. Stress accelerates aging. Choosing gentleness quietly avoids scrutiny. Quiet choices are protective. Protection extends service life. Service life is what matters when redesign is unavailable. Redesign remains theoretical. Bodies operate in the present. Present conditions matter more than future promises. Present conditions include sleep depth, movement, rhythm, and mental load. Reducing mental load improves sleep. Improved sleep enhances repair. Enhanced repair slows decline. None of this is guaranteed. It is probabilistic. Probabilities improve under better conditions. Animals live inside improved probabilities by default. Humans must curate them. Curation requires discernment. Discernment improves with age. This is a paradox often missed. As physical capacity declines, discernment often increases. Discernment prevents waste. Waste is costly. Preventing waste conserves resources. Conservation extends function. Function extends autonomy. Autonomy reduces stress. Reduced stress supports repair. The loop unwinds. This unwinding does not eliminate aging. It changes its slope. Slope matters more than endpoint when time is long. Animals experience steep slopes near the end. Humans experience shallow slopes for longer. Shallow slopes feel tedious. Tedium invites impatience. Impatience increases friction. Friction steepens slopes. Patience flattens them. Patience is learned through constraint. Constraint arrives with age. Age teaches patience if allowed. If resisted, age teaches frustration. Frustration is expensive. Expense shortens options. Options narrow regardless. Narrowing can be graceful or jagged. Grace comes from alignment. Alignment is cooperation between mind and body. Cooperation reduces internal conflict. Conflict consumes energy. Energy is finite. Finite energy demands respect. Respect is not sentiment. It is practical. Practical choices accumulate quietly. Quiet accumulation outperforms dramatic intervention over long spans. Animals demonstrate this without awareness. Humans must notice it to apply it. Noticing without judgment is the skill. Judgment reintroduces stress. Stress accelerates decline. Again, the same mechanics. There is no mystery here, only repetition across scales. Cells do it. Systems do it. Minds do it. Cultures do it. Aging is repetition under diminishing margin. Managing repetition gently preserves coherence. Coherence supports presence. Presence is low cost. Low-cost living extends continuity. Continuity is what aging offers when youth is gone. It is enough, not thrilling, not impressive. Enough. Enough sustains. Sustaining allows the story to continue without urgency. Urgency is expensive. Removing urgency is relief. Relief opens repair windows. Repair windows do quiet work. Quiet work keeps things together. Togetherness matters. Animals exit when togetherness fails. Humans linger while togetherness holds. Holding requires compromise. Compromise reduces extremes. Reduced extremes stabilize systems. Stability does not end change. It moderates it. Moderation is the art of long living. Animals practice it unconsciously. Humans must choose it consciously. Choice appears because awareness persists. Awareness is the gift and the burden. Using awareness to reduce load rather than increase demand determines how aging feels. This determination is ongoing. It does not finalize. It adjusts. Adjustment is continuous. Continuous adjustment does not need explanation. It needs time and space. Space appears when attention loosens. Loosening does not abandon care. It refines it. Refined care is efficient. Efficiency preserves function. Preserved function supports continuity. Continuity allows rest. Rest restores enough to continue. And continuing quietly, without pushing toward conclusions, is the natural state this story returns to, leaving the question open as context rather than command, present, without pressure, unfolding at its own pace. Waiting for the next opening to appear, when the body keeps waking up each day without making any announcement that something has changed, yet everything feels slightly different than before. There is rarely a moment when aging arrives. No signal, no clear beginning. It slips in through accumulation. One morning, the floor feels harder. Another morning, recovery takes longer. Another day, the body asks for a pause that used to be optional. None of these moments stand out on their own. This is why aging feels confusing. It does not happen all at once. It does not ask permission. It does not follow a schedule that can be prepared for. The body simply recalibrates quietly, and the mind notices after the fact. Animals experience the same recalibration, but without commentary. Humans narrate every shift. Narration stretches experience. It adds weight. It adds continuity. It turns adjustment into story. Story can help. Story can also exhaust. Exhaustion is not always physical. It is often the result of carrying awareness for too long without rest. Awareness keeps scanning for change. Change keeps appearing. The loop never fully closes. The body keeps adapting, and the mind keeps tracking. Over time, the tracking becomes heavier than the adaptation itself. This is where the final difference between humans and other animals becomes clear. Animals age inside their bodies. Humans age inside their thoughts about their bodies. Thoughts are not neutral. They shape physiology. They influence tension, breathing, posture, sleep depth. They determine whether discomfort is interpreted as threat or information. Threat activates defense. Information invites adjustment. Defense is expensive. Adjustment is efficient. Efficiency matters most when reserves are low. Later life is not defined by lack of strength alone. It is defined by reduced margin. Margin is what allows mistakes without consequence. Aging narrows margin. Narrow margin requires gentler handling. Animals handle this instinctively. Humans must learn it consciously, often later than necessary. Learning arrives through repetition. The body asks. The mind resists. The body asks again. Eventually, resistance costs more than cooperation. Cooperation begins quietly. Movements slow. Decisions simplify. Priorities shift. Not dramatically, gradually. This gradual shift is often mistaken for decline. But decline is only part of it. The other part is refinement. Excess effort is removed. Unnecessary strain is dropped. The system becomes more selective. Selectivity preserves coherence. Coherence is what allows continuity. Continuity is not youth extended. It is function maintained within changing limits. Animals maintain continuity until it ends. Humans maintain continuity while still remembering youth. Memory complicates continuity. It introduces comparison. Comparison introduces friction. When comparison eases, continuity feels less like loss and more like adaptation. This does not require optimism. It requires realism without hostility. The body is not an enemy. It is a system operating under constraints that were never designed for endless extension. The fact that it continues at all is not trivial. It is evidence of remarkable adaptability. Human bodies are not built to age comfortably. They are built to adapt relentlessly. Adaptation under scarcity looks uneven. It looks imperfect. It looks fragile from the outside. From the inside, it feels like constant negotiation. Negotiation is tiring. But negotiation is also flexible. It allows adjustment rather than collapse. Animals experience less negotiation because their lives resolve sooner. Humans experience more because they keep going. Keeping going has value. It allows connection across generations. It allows memory to persist. It allows understanding to deepen even as capacity changes. These things matter. They mattered enough that evolution tolerated prolonged decline as an acceptable cost. That cost is paid individually, but the benefit is shared collectively. Understanding this does not make aging pleasant. It makes it intelligible. Intelligibility reduces fear. Fear accelerates deterioration. Reducing fear does not stop aging, but it softens its impact. Softening matters when time is long. Time is long for humans. Long time requires pacing. Pacing requires acceptance of limits without surrender to them. This balance is difficult. Animals never need to find it. Humans do. When the balance is found, even briefly, aging loses some of its sharpness. The body still signals. The signals are still real. But they no longer dominate attention. Attention widens. Life is no longer reduced to monitoring decline. Monitoring drains energy. Living reallocates it. Reallocation is the body's strength. It has been reallocating since birth. Growth, learning, reproduction, recovery. Aging is another reallocation phase. Less emphasis on expansion, more emphasis on preservation. Preservation is quieter than growth. It does not announce itself. It does not trend upward. It simply holds things together long enough to matter. Holding together is not failure. It is function. Animals exit when holding together fails. Humans often hold together for decades longer. That holding is not free. It requires compromise. Compromise reshapes experience. Experience becomes slower, more deliberate, less reactive. This is not necessarily worse. It is different. Difference becomes painful only when judged against an outdated standard. When the standard shifts, pain reduces. The comparison with other animals dissolves here. They did not age better. They aged according to different constraints. Humans chose constraints that favored intelligence, memory, and culture. Aging reflects that choice. Nothing went wrong. Something unfolded. And unfolding does not require closure. It does not require a solution tonight. It continues whether or not it is understood. The body continues adjusting. The mind can rest from trying to oversee every adjustment. Rest does not mean giving up. It means allowing processes to proceed without interference. Interference is costly. Allowance is economical. Economy matters in long systems. So this is where the story settles. Not with an answer, but with context. Aging is not a defect to correct or a comparison to win. It is the lived consequence of a long experiment in adaptability, an experiment that extended life faster than it redesigned the body, and then asked that body to keep going anyway. It does, imperfectly, unevenly, quietly, and that quiet continuation is enough for now. Enough to let the question loosen its grip. Enough to allow attention to drift without urgency. Enough to rest inside a body that is still negotiating its limits honestly, still breathing, still functioning, still here. Not because it was built for endless endurance, but because it learned how to adapt under pressure. An adaptation does not need to be explained to continue. It only needs space. And space appears when the demand for resolution fades, leaving what remains to unfold at its own pace. Without insistence, without struggle, and without needing to be anything other than what it already is.